You need a home, and we need a mommy," the twin girls said to the homeless woman at the train station. The snow fell heavier than expected that evening in West Concord. Though it was only the season's first snowfall, the wind whipped with the chill of deep winter. The train station sat quiet, the last departure long gone, leaving behind only the hum of old heaters and the echo of silence. Marissa sat hunched on a steel bench near the far end of the platform. Her blonde hair, tangled and dusted in snowflakes, clung to her cheeks. She wrapped her thin arms tighter around herself, the sleeves of her worn coat offering little protection against the biting cold. Her lips were pale, her eyes, once bright, now reflected exhaustion and defeat. She hadn't eaten in 2 days. She hadn't spoken to anyone in longer. 2 little girls in matching pink coats darted into the frame of her vision. They ran, giggling and breathless, the sound of their tiny boots tapping over tile. Marissa didn't look up. She didn't want to startle them, didn't want to be seen at all. But Daisy, the bolder of the twins, saw her. She slowed, then stepped forward with quiet, innocent purpose. In her mittened hand, she held a small cookie wrapped in tissue, a heart-shaped one she had decorated that afternoon. Marissa blinked, confused, as the child gently set it in her lap. "You need a home," Daisy said softly. "And we need a mommy." Marissa stared, stunned. Before she could find words, a tall man rushed over and grabbed the girl's arm. "Daisy, Lily, back here. Now," he ordered firmly, pulling both girls behind him. He turned his gaze on Marissa, guarded and sharp. "What were you doing with my daughters?" Marissa's voice trembled as she lifted her hands in surrender. I didn't do anything. I swear." The man's eyes dropped to her coat, the torn seams, the deep purple in her fingers, the way she shook, not from fear, but from cold. Her face was too young to look so hopeless. She hadn't asked for help, hadn't said a word. She was just there, fading. Jonah's jaw tightened, then loosened. Something in him shifted. Marissa stood, as if to remove herself from the situation. But the world spun. Her knees gave out, and she collapsed, her head knocking against the icy metal column. "Daddy, she's dying," Lily cried, clinging to his leg. Jonah knelt quickly beside the young woman. He checked her pulse, weak, but steady. Her skin was ice cold. She needed warmth. Fast. No trains, no cabs. The temperature was plummeting. He made a decision in the space of a breath. He lifted her easily. She weighed little more than his daughters. Her hair brushed against his chest, damp with melting snow. He turned to the girls. "Come on." They followed without question, holding tight to the sides of his coat. As they walked through the parking lot toward the car, Daisy's small voice rose again. "Daddy, bring her home. We can share our room." Jonah didn't answer. But he didn't say no. The front door opened with a gust of wind. Heat spilled out to meet them. Inside, Jonah laid Marissa carefully on the living room sofa, pulling a soft blanket over her frail frame. The fireplace crackled nearby, its glow flickering across her face. She didn't stir. Daisy and Lily stood just behind their father, peeking out from behind his legs. Their eyes never left her. In the quiet of the room, something shifted. A moment ended, and a new one began. Marissa awoke to warmth she did not expect. Her eyes fluttered open slowly, the blur of a soft room replacing the last memory of metal benches and bitter wind. The fire crackled nearby, casting flickers of orange and gold against the walls. Her head throbbed faintly, but her body no longer shook. Her golden hair lay messily across the pillow, strands catching the firelight as if glowing. She turned slightly, and her eyes settled on a crayon drawing placed beside her. The scribbled image of 2 little girls and a woman with long yellow hair, all holding hands beneath a sun that smiled in the corner. A man's voice, low and careful, broke the silence. "You are safe." She looked up. A man with sharp but gentle features stood beside the sofa. His eyes, intelligent, observant, scanned her face with concern. He held a small electronic thermometer, and without touching her, leaned just close enough to aim it toward her forehead. "No fever," he murmured more to himself than to her. "That's good." She blinked, her voice soft, hoarse. "Where am I?" "My home," he said. "You collapsed at the train station last night." She sat up slightly, clutching the blanket around her. "I didn't mean to. I wasn't trying to cause trouble." He shook his head. "You did not." His words were calm. No pity, no judgment, only a tone of matter-of-fact care. He glanced at the small scrapes on her hands and the faint bruise forming along her temple. "I'm Jonah," he added after a beat, "and those drawings are from my daughters." Almost on cue, the pitter-patter of little feet sounded from the hallway. Daisy and Lily appeared, faces peeking out from behind the doorway. Each carried a cup in two small hands. "She's awake," Lily whispered, louder than she meant to. They scampered over to the sofa, placing a cup of warm milk on the table. "We made this. It's got honey," Daisy announced proudly. Marissa tried to smile. "Thank you. That's very sweet of you." Lily tilted her head. "Do you like your hair? Our mommy had hair like yours." Jonah cleared his throat gently. The girls fell quiet but stayed close. Marissa pulled the blanket tighter. "I do not have a home. I lost my job. My papers were stolen." Her voice cracked, but she kept it steady. Jonah did not press. He simply nodded, eyes fixed on hers, taking in the pain, the exhaustion. He said nothing further, but his silence was not cold. It was cautious, respectful. As the girls lingered, he moved quietly through the room, collecting scattered toys and arranging a small bedding area on the nearby daybed. He did not offer her his room, nor did he try to invade her space. Everything about his actions felt measured, thoughtful, not intrusive. When Marissa reached up to adjust her sleeve, the fabric slid back to reveal a long, faded scar along her forearm. Jonah noticed. His body stilled for a second, but he asked no questions, gave no reaction. That night, long after the girls were tucked in, Jonah sat reading by the fire. He heard it first, the muffled sounds, the quiet struggle. He stood, moving toward the living room. There on the sofa, Marissa twisted in her sleep, her breath ragged, her face contorted in distress. "No, I didn't steal anything," she murmured, voice rising with each word. "It wasn't me." Jonah stepped closer. "Marissa," he called gently, not touching her. "You are safe now. It's okay." Her eyes snapped open, glistening with panic and confusion. She gasped for breath. Jonah stepped back, giving her space. "I'll call someone." Within minutes, he was on the phone with his private physician. "She is stable, just exhausted," the doctor said later, after checking her. "But she is running on empty. Malnutrition, psychological trauma. She needs rest and time." Jonah stood beside the fire again, his hands folded, the reflection of flames dancing across his face. He looked toward the sofa where Marissa now slept again, this time deeper, but her hands still clenched in a silent fight with her own mind. She was not just a woman without a coat or a home. She was someone carrying more than cold in her bones. And somehow, though he had not planned it, she was now in his home, and in the hearts of two little girls who had seen something in her that he had only just begun to understand. Over the next few days, Marissa slowly came back to life. Her golden hair, once matted and dulled by snow, was now clean and soft, falling in gentle waves around her shoulders. Her skin, though still pale, had gained back some of its color, and her eyes, tired but open, held a quiet alertness that hadn't been there before. In the warm house filled with the soft noise of giggles and tiny footsteps, she was never alone for long. Daisy and Lily followed her everywhere. In the mornings, they climbed onto the rug in the living room and begged her to draw with them. She taught them how to hold crayons differently, how to shade with soft strokes. They listened with awe. "Like this?" Daisy asked, tongue sticking out as she tried. "Perfect," Marissa whispered, her voice just a little stronger now. In the afternoons, the three of them built towers with blocks, flipped through picture books, and turned the living room into an imaginary bakery. Marissa played along, putting on a pretend apron made from a scarf and pretending to taste the invisible cupcakes they served her on plastic plates. Whenever she walked down the hallway, the girls ran up and wrapped their arms around her legs. "Do not go too far," Lily squealed. One snowy morning, Marissa sat cross-legged on the floor with the girls and showed them how to fold paper into snowflakes. She helped guide their tiny scissors along the folds, helping them create delicate, lacy patterns. Jonah stood quietly in the hallway, just out of view, holding a mug of coffee that had long since gone cold. He watched her laugh softly, brushing paper scraps from Lily's hair, her expression lit from within. She did not know he was there, but he did not want to move. She looked nothing like the fragile woman he'd carried in from the cold. And in that moment, something stirred in Jonah's chest. Something quiet, but deeply real. That evening, dinner was a quiet affair. The dining table warmed by candlelight and the smell of roasted vegetables. Jonah had set 3 places, one for him, one for Marissa, and a shared spot for the twins, who sat side by side, swinging their legs in unison. Marissa stood by the kitchen archway, holding her plate, hesitant. "I can sit over there," she said softly, motioning to the far corner of the room. "I don't want to make anyone uncomfortable." Jonah looked up from his seat. "You are not making anyone uncomfortable. I am still a guest." "You are in my house," he replied, his tone low but firm. "You are not a guest." Marissa blinked. For a second, something in her posture softened. She walked slowly toward the table and sat down next to Lily. Dinner passed in soft conversation, mostly the girls telling wild stories about unicorns and snow castles. Marissa listened patiently, smiling between each forkful, gently wiping Daisy's chin when soup spilled over her lip. Then it happened. She reached for her spoon, but knocked it off the table by accident. It clattered to the floor. She bent to retrieve it, just as Jonah did the same from the other side. Under the table, their hands touched for the briefest second. Their eyes met, under soft shadows, amidst the quiet murmur of the girls giggling above them. It was not dramatic, not romantic in any traditional sense, but it was the first time they truly saw each other, not just as savior and stranger, or as man and woman thrown together by chance, but as two people quietly, inexplicably connected. Jonah pulled his hand back first, handing her the spoon. "Here," he said, voice steady, though something in his throat tightened. "Thank you," she whispered, avoiding his gaze, yet her cheeks flushed slightly. Dinner went on as usual, but in the stillness between words, something had shifted. That night, when the girls were tucked in, Marissa stood at the window, watching snow fall outside. Her hand rested lightly on the glass. Behind her, Jonah passed through the hallway, but paused for just a moment, watching her silhouette against the dim glow. Neither said a word, but something had begun. Something quiet, something real. Jonah sat alone in his study, the room dim except for the glow of his laptop screen. His fingers hovered over the keyboard before finally typing Marissa's full name. He had told himself it was to protect the girls, to be sure, to know for certain who he had let into their home. The search results loaded, and one headline pulled him in immediately. Design student expelled after alleged theft of final project. Jonah leaned closer. The article was from 3 years ago, short and vague. Marissa had been accused of stealing another student's design during her final year. The university revoked her scholarship. The student who made the accusation came from a family of donors. No trial, no appeal. His jaw clenched. No details on her side of the story. He shut the laptop but could not shake the weight sitting on his chest. That night, while the girls painted ornaments in the living room, Jonah approached the couch where Marissa sat folding laundry. She looked up and smiled gently. "Hey, they've been asking for you to help decorate the tree." Jonah didn't smile back. He sat down, slowly. "I need to ask you something," he said, voice quiet but firm. And I'd rather not wait. Marissa's hands paused over the folded towel. He met her eyes. Did you take something that didn't belong to you? Back in school? Her face froze. She didn't ask what he meant. She didn't look surprised, only tired. Marissa set the towel down in her lap. No, she said softly. Jonah nodded, but said nothing. That silence cut deeper than any accusation. Marissa stared at him, waiting, hoping for something. Belief, reassurance, anything. But it didn't come. I see, she whispered. She stood, moved slowly toward the hallway, and disappeared into the guest room. When she returned, she had her small tote bag in hand. Jonah stood too. Marissa, you don't believe me, she said, not angry, just quiet. Certain, it's not that simple. It never is. Her voice cracked, and she took a deep breath. But it's always the same. She stepped around him, carefully. In the doorway, Daisy and Lily watched with wide eyes, holding a paper snowflake between them. Where are you going? Daisy asked. Marissa knelt, brushing hair from their cheeks. She kissed each of them gently on the forehead. You're beautiful girls. You made me feel like I mattered. No, Lily said, eyes welling. You're our mommy. We need a mommy. Daisy echoed. Please don't go. Marissa's lips trembled. She hugged them one last time, then stood quickly, before she could change her mind. Jonah moved toward her. Marissa. Wait. But she was already slipping on her coat, pulling the scarf tighter around her neck with shaking hands. Without another word, she opened the front door. Cold wind rushed in, sweeping through the warmth of the house. Her blonde hair whipped in the gusts as she stepped out into the snow, the hem of her coat flapping behind her. She didn't look back. Jonah stood in the doorway, the girls crying behind him, and he watched her figure grow smaller and smaller in the swirling white until she was gone. The house was too quiet. Jonah sat on the edge of Daisy and Lily's bed, watching them stare at the ceiling. It had been 5 nights since Marissa left, and every night ended the same way. When is Mommy coming home? Daisy asked, her voice a whisper. Lily rolled toward him, eyes wide and pleading. She said she would stay. Did she stop loving us? Jonah's throat tightened. She didn't stop, he said gently. She just needed time. They didn't understand. How could they? The only mother they remembered had been gone for years. And now Marissa, this woman with soft hands, kind eyes, and a broken heart, had left too. When the girls finally slept, Jonah wandered downstairs and found the envelope sitting on the kitchen counter. It had been there since the morning after she left. He hadn't opened it. Now, with the fire casting gold light across the living room, he sat in the armchair and tore it open. It was addressed simply, "For Daisy and Lily." He read it in silence. My sweet girls. You gave me something I didn't think I deserved. You made me feel like I belonged. I'm not leaving because I stopped caring. I'm leaving because I don't want you to love someone who doesn't know how to love herself. One day, I hope I'll be strong enough to come back, not as someone who needs saving, but as someone who can give you the love you deserve. Jonah closed his eyes. Her words echoed in his mind, ones she had said the night before she left. I don't want to be measured by someone else's shadow. He had looked at her, not for who she was, but through the lens of fear and past pain. That night, Jonah barely slept. At dawn, silence was broken by a click at the front door. Empty. He turned, heart sinking, until he noticed the back gate ajar. Then he heard it. Whispers, giggles, boots crunching in the snow. Jonah's blood ran cold. He rushed outside, coat unzipped, heart hammering. His breath formed clouds in the air as he scanned the snowy yard. Daisy? Lily? No answer. He sprinted to the street, then down the sidewalk. Tire tracks marked the slush. No sign of the girls. Panic clawed at him. Then, a glimmer of pink in the distance. He followed it, past the bakery, across the park fence, through the snow-covered playground. There they were, tiny figures bundled in coats, sitting beside a familiar silhouette on the park bench. Marissa. She sat, hunched forward, hands in her lap, blonde hair dusted with snow. Tears streaked her face. Lily and Daisy flanked her, arms wrapped tight around her waist. "Mommy's cold," Daisy said softly, looking up at her. Marissa didn't speak, only held them tighter. Jonah stopped a few feet away, breathless. He had imagined this moment. But reality was so much heavier. Her shoulders shook, not from cold, but from everything she had carried alone. He stepped forward slowly. Marissa looked up. Their eyes met. Jonah saw it all. Fear, pain, apology, and something else. The fragile spark of hope. "I was wrong," he said, voice breaking. So wrong. The girls looked between them, holding tighter. Jonah knelt beside the bench, the snow soaking through his pants, and reached for her hand. "You don't have to come back perfect," he said. "You just have to come back." Marissa looked at their joined hands, then at the girls, and finally back at him. "I didn't think I'd be missed," she whispered. Daisy leaned into her, muffled in her scarf. "Your mommy. We miss you every second." Lily nodded. Every second. Jonah wrapped his arms around all three of them, pulling them into his chest. Snow fell silently around them, soft and forgiving, and for the first time in days, everything felt like it might be okay. Snow still lingered on the porch steps when Jonah opened the front door. This time, Marissa didn't resist. She didn't argue, but she didn't speak either. She stood just inside the threshold, wrapped in the coat he had placed over her shoulders in the park. Her hair was damp, eyes red. Jonah knelt to unlace the twins' boots, his voice low. "You're home now," he said, not looking up. Daisy and Lily ran to their room, leaving the silence behind like a footprint. He turned to face Marissa, still trembling in the entryway. "You're not a burden," he said softly. "You're not the problem." She flinched at that. He took a step closer, hands open, not touching. "You're the answer, Marissa. For them, for me, even if it took me too long to see it." Her lips parted, but her breath caught. They moved into the living room, the fire crackling low. She sat on the edge of the sofa. He sat across from her, waiting. She stared into the flames for a long time before speaking. "It started with a drawing," she said finally. He said nothing, just listened. "I was in design school, top of my class. One day, I submitted a concept for a sustainability campaign. My professor loved it, said it could go far." She paused, swallowed, but then someone stole it. "My roommate. She submitted a similar design for a private competition and won. Big time." Jonah leaned forward, heart tightening. "I confronted her. She laughed, said there was no proof. 2 weeks later, an article came out, about me, accusing me of stealing from her. She laughed once, bitter and hollow. I lost my scholarship. My internship dropped me. My landlord kicked me out when I couldn't pay rent. And my boyfriend?" She shook her head, smile cracking. He said, "You're too much trouble," and left. Jonah sat still, absorbing every word. "I stopped trying after that," she whispered. "I just survived." Until that night at the train station. He finally spoke. "I'm sorry." She blinked, stunned by the simplicity of it. "No explanations," he added. "No excuses. I've lived too long assuming the worst of people. It was easier than risking being wrong." She looked at him, really looked. He picked up the towel resting by the hearth and walked over. Without a word, he knelt beside her. Carefully, he used the towel to dry the damp ends of her hair. Slow, gentle movements. He didn't touch her skin. He never crossed that line. When he finished, he set the towel aside and met her eyes. Tears welled again. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered. "I don't know how to trust that it's okay to stay." "You're not alone in that," he said. "I'm afraid too." She hesitated. Then, like a bird unsure of landing, she leaned into him. just enough to rest her head on his shoulder. He didn't move, didn't breathe for a second. Then, softly, he placed his hand over hers. They sat like that for a while. As the fire popped and the night wrapped around the house, it wasn't a grand declaration. It wasn't a promise. But for the first time, Marissa let herself be held. Not because she was weak, but because she was finally safe enough to stop holding herself up. And Jonah, who had once built walls as high as the sky, let her in. Christmas had blanketed the city in soft snow and golden light. Wreaths hung from every lamppost. Fairy lights blinked in warm rhythm, and the towering tree outside Concord Hall shimmered like a beacon of hope. It was Christmas Eve, the night of the annual Railways Gala, the biggest event hosted by Jonah's company. And this year, the theme was Rebuilding Hope Through Rails. Earlier that morning, the Reeves family arrived at a local shelter, not in formal wear, but bundled in scarves and gloves, arms filled with gifts and supplies. Marissa stood behind the food table, ladling hot soup into paper bowls. Her movements were careful, attentive. She crouched when she spoke to each guest, eyes level, voice soft. She listened, she nodded, she remembered. Jonah watched her from across the room, not interfering, only admiring. He could see the truth in her face. She had been on the other side. And now she gave back without pity. Only quiet respect. Daisy and Lily ran between guests, handing out cookies in the shape of hearts, their giggles lighting up the cold morning. "Merry Christmas, you matter," they chirped in unison to everyone they met. One elderly woman paused at Marissa's table, eyes locking with hers. Her grip on Marissa's hand was firm, trembling. "I know those eyes," the woman said. "You've survived snow before, haven't you?" Marissa's breath hitched. She nodded. The woman nodded back. "Merry Christmas, Snow Angel." That evening, Concord Hall transformed into a dream of warmth and light. Beneath a vaulted ceiling of glass, artificial snow fell gently over hundreds of attendees. Jonah arrived with Daisy, Lily, and Marissa at his side. No longer a stranger, no longer unknown. As the ceremony began, a hush fell over the crowd. A spotlight lit up the runway. Marissa's design appeared first. A simple gown, white, trimmed with silver threads. The fabric shimmered like the night snow on the day she had collapsed. Along the hem, delicate stitching traced the image of railway tracks, intersecting, leading forward. Hope, stitched into every inch. The audience rose to their feet. Applause thunderous and sincere. From behind the curtain, Marissa blinked back tears. She was no longer invisible. Then, two small figures stepped onto the stage. Daisy and Lily stood under the spotlight, holding hands. Daisy began, her voice soft but steady. "Home is where Mommy Marissa sings us to sleep." Lily continued without missing a beat. "Home is where she smiles, and where Daddy smiles because of her." Silence followed. No music, no whispers, only the sound of hearts opening. Marissa covered her mouth, tears breaking free. Her knees wobbled. Someone handed her a tissue. She couldn't look away from those two little voices that had rewritten her life. A figure stepped into the light. Jonah. In his hand was a worn piece of cloth, a knitted scarf, pale blue, with frayed ends. He held it up. "This," he said into the microphone, "was left on a steel bench at a train station. The night my life changed." He looked past the crowd, straight at Marissa. A blonde woman sat alone in the snow, yet somehow she was still warm enough to love my daughters. Gasps rippled through the room. He stepped forward, toward her. Voice low but firm. "Marissa," he said, "you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to prove anything." He paused. "You just have to stay. My girls and I, we need you. No ring, no grand gesture, just truth." Marissa didn't wait. She stepped onto the stage, tears still streaking her cheeks. Daisy and Lily ran into her arms, hugging tightly. She knelt, holding them as if she'd never let go again. Jonah joined them, wrapping his arms around all three. Snow, soft, white, and glowing, drifted down from the ceiling like a silent blessing. The crowd stood again, not for fashion, not for the CEO, but for a woman who had once been lost in the snow, and for a family who had chosen each other. Snow fell gently outside, soft as feathers, blanketing the world in a quiet hush. It was New Year's Eve. The final hours of the year ticked away slowly, and inside Jonah's home, golden light flickered from the fireplace and kitchen lamps, wrapping the space in warmth. Marissa stood at the kitchen counter, her golden hair tied back loosely, a gentle smile playing on her lips. The scent of butter, vanilla, and cinnamon filled the air as she pulled trays of cookies shaped like stars and hearts from the oven, Daisy and Lily's favorites. In the living room, the twin girls were a flurry of giggles and flour. Dressed in matching snowflake pajamas, they squabbled joyfully over who got to sprinkle more sugar on the cooling cookies. Lily sneezed, sending a puff of flour into Daisy's hair, and the two collapsed in laughter. Marissa turned, hands on her hips, trying to look stern. "What am I going to do with you two?" she asked, though her eyes betrayed her amusement. From the doorway, Jonah watched quietly, arms folded, a rare and soft smile on his face. It had been so long since he'd seen a scene like this. Peaceful, messy, real, something he never thought he'd have again. On the dining table sat a small wooden sign, the paint still slightly tacky. It was hand-painted in pastel pinks and purples, with large, childlike letters. "This is our mommy." Marissa saw it as she set down a fresh tray of cookies. Her breath caught, fingers still mid-motion. Her eyes shimmered, not with sadness, but with the kind of happiness that hurt in the best way. Jonah stepped forward, gently placing his hand on her back. No words were spoken, but none were needed. As the final minutes of the year approached, the four of them gathered by the large living room window. Outside, the sky darkened into velvet, and distant booms signaled the start of the fireworks. The countdown began. 10, 9. Daisy and Lily each clambered onto Marissa's lap, their small arms locking around her. 6, 5. Jonah stood behind them, wrapping his arms around all three. 3, 2, 1. The sky erupted in color, gold and crimson bursting above the snow-covered trees. Reflections danced across the window and lit up Marissa's hair, Lily's rosy cheeks, and Jonah's eyes, softer now than they had been a year ago. "Thank you for staying," Jonah whispered, his voice barely audible over the popping of fireworks. Marissa leaned slightly into his chest, her voice trembling in the best way. "Thank you for giving me a place to belong." They stood there a moment longer, quiet, whole. No one in this little home was perfect. Each carried their own past, their own broken pieces and fears. But they had chosen one another. They had chosen to try, chosen to build something real, from the coldest, loneliest of places. From a snowy train station where a little girl once said, "You need a home, and we need a mommy." And that had been the beginning. A final burst of fireworks lit the sky as Marissa slipped back into the kitchen. She opened the oven and pulled out one last tray. The twins ran to her side, arms wrapping around her legs as they sang out in chorus. "Happy New Year, Mommy." Jonah joined them, resting his hand on Marissa's shoulder. She turned to him with a smile, one that said she was no longer lost. In the warm, glowing heart of a home that had waited quietly for love to return, a new family had truly begun. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey of second chances, healing, and unexpected family. Marissa's story reminds us that sometimes, love finds us in the coldest places, and all it takes is a little kindness to change everything. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Kindness and Love Tales for more heartwarming stories just like this. Every week, we bring you new tales that prove love still exists, even in the most unexpected moments. Hit the bell so you never miss a story that might warm your heart, just like this one.